Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here from Eastman's Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. Today, we're going to talk about balsam firs. Balsam firs are actually one of the most common evergreen trees that we see here at Eastman. They have a pointed spire-like shape. They're actually popular Christmas trees, but most of those that are used for Christmas trees are grown on plantations rather than taken out of the forest. And they can grow to heights of 40 to 60 feet and diameters of up to 3 to 4 feet. And they're very shade tolerant. They tend to grow in cool climates with consistent moisture at their roots. That's very important. And the needles are flat, two-sided, and quite soft. They can't be rolled between the fingers because they're flat. And they have two bright white bands on the underside, somewhat similar to what we see with the eastern hemlocks. The bark is thin and gray and smooth, but it has many pitch pockets. These are resin blisters, which are very characteristic, and actually it's probably the easiest way to identify a balsam fir. And interestingly, they have beautiful cones. They're purplish, they're thumb-sized, and unlike other conifers, they point upward. And when we talk about them, you're probably not going to see them. So very interesting. And they're known for their aromatic Christmassy smell. So there's a typical balsam fir. It's got this spire-like shape, and they can grow up to 40 to 60 feet. And the needles are flat. This is showing those needles. They're flat, they're two-sided, they're very soft, and you can't roll them between your fingers because they're flat. But if you look very carefully here, you can see they have these two white streaks on the underside, and that resembles the streaks that we see in the eastern hemlock needles. And the balsam fir needles are actually quite aromatic. So how do we tell the needles of the balsam fir from that of the eastern hemlock? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Even though they both have those parallel white lines on the underside, the way they're connected to the stem is very important. So again, if you look here, and I'll show you a blow up of this, the balsam fir needles are actually connected by a little green thing that looks like a suction cup, whereas the eastern hemlock needles are connected to the stem with these short woody projections. So here, this nicely shows these little suction cups. So again, you can see it's a little nubbin. It's green. It goes right to the branch, and they look like suction cups. So this even shows it a little bit better. So there you see, very striking. And if you were to strip some of the needles off, what you would see is that the underlying branch is very smooth. Whereas if you tried to do this with an eastern hemlock, you'd actually have lots of little small woody knobs. The buds of the balsam fir do grow at the ends of the branches, and they're small, they're waxy, they're resinous in the winter, but in the spring they burst into bright green citrus-flavored shoots that are actually quite aromatic. And another comparison is the balsam fir versus the spruce. The spruce trees tend to be more rounded compared to the pointy firs that have that spire-like look. And the spruce bark tends to be plated, whereas the fir bark tends to be smoother and has many pitch pockets. So spruce needles are four-sided, pointy, and sharp. So it's very easy to distinguish the prickly feeling that you get with spruce needles compared to the very soft feeling that you get with balsam fir needles. And the spruce needles attach to branches with a small stem, whereas again, those the balsam fir needles attach directly to the branches with those little green suction cup-like devices. And spruce branches tend to curve down and then up, and spruce cones hang down, whereas balsam fir cones face upward. So again, here showing the spruces with these square, stiff needles. They're very prickly. And down here are the balsam fir needles, which again are very soft, and you can't roll them between your fingers because they're very flat. And here's the bark. I find that the bark is probably the easiest way to identify balsam firs. So the balsam fir bark is smoother than that of most spruce trees, and it commonly has lots of pitch pockets, also known as resin blisters. Here are multiple little things that stick out. These are pitch pockets or resin blisters, and they can actually be popped, but you have to be very careful that you don't get the resin in your eyes. And those blisters contain a very sticky, fragrant liquid resin. Okay, so again, comparing the spruce versus the balsam fir. Once again, the needles of the spruce are prickly, uh, whereas the needles of the balsam fir are soft. The cones of the spruce tend to go down, whereas the cones of the balsam fir stick up. And again, just in terms of the overall appearance, once again, the spruces tend to have a more rounded base and then go up, whereas the balsam firs tend to have this more spire-like look. But again, here is the difference in the bark. So again, the bark tends to be plated in the spruce, whereas in the balsam fir, it's smoother, but has lots of pitch pockets. Okay, here are these balsam fir cones. You got to be really lucky to see these. And that's because they tend to grow on the branches near the top of the tree. They have kind of a purplish color. And key thing is they hang upward. It's the only conifer tree in which the cones face upward as opposed to hanging down. And unlike the cones of most conifers, they actually disintegrate right on the tree. So again, the individual seeds then ripen and are released. And the seeds are mostly dispersed by the wind, but some small mammals may play a supplemental role in dispersing the seeds. So again, since these are up at the top of the balsam fir, unless you have a second floor to your home, you're probably not going to actually see them. So again, this is showing some, here they're a little bit more grayish colored. And again, they're facing upward. And they're usually resinous most of the season. But in the fall, they dry out, they open up, they lose their scales, and then the seeds actually drop out. So you actually never see a cone fall to the ground. And once again, those seeds will get dispersed by the wind or by some small mammals. So what's the value of balsam fir? Well, it provides both food and cover for various mammals and birds. Probably the biggest value is providing shelter. It provides shelter for white-tailed deer, moose, snowshoe hares, ruffed grouse, and many other small mammals and songbirds. The dense stands will intercept heavy snowfall, and that creates calmer, more insulated spaces near the ground, so the animals can easily walk and escape the harsh winds. And its foliage is browsed by both moose and deer, though the deer tend to prefer other plants over balsam fir. And the seeds are also eaten by red squirrels, chipmunks, crossbills, grouse, and pine mice. And the needles are often eaten by caterpillars. And the balsam firs actually play host to 114 species of moth and butterfly larvae. And they provide nesting sites for many birds. So there are certain diseases that affect balsam firs. That's actually why we're doing this update today. You've probably heard of hemlock woolly adelgid. That's a very feared disease that affects hemlocks. We've not yet seen that in Eastman. But there's also a balsam woolly adelgid. Again, it's a tiny sap-sucking insect that feeds on true balsam firs. And this also tends to be kept in check by very cold winters. But it's been seen more and more after some pretty mild winters. You might see some white woolly spots on the trunk. That's the name woolly adelgid is because they provide this white substance over the top of them. And often they're difficult to see. You may even have difficulty differentiating them from some of the pitch spots. Actually, a small hand lens might help you assist in differentiating them. And there may also be swellings around the buds and branch nodes. That's called the gout phase, but that's most common again in the upper crown, but below the very highest branches. So you may not actually see up high enough to see those. And heavy infestations of this insect can kill a tree within 3 years. Um, Balsam fir can also be affected by several diseases caused by fungi. Similar to the more common white pine needle blight, balsam firs can get needle cast. And needle cast is caused by a fungus that thrives and spreads during wet summers. And then the following summer, symptoms appear. The needles tend to brown and die back on the branches. Root rot is another fungal disease. Leads to discoloration and yellowing of the needles, delay in buds breaking open, branches flagging, wilting of new growth, and eventually death of the tree. And there may or may not be an apparent reduction in the growth of diseased trees before they're ultimately killed. Another fungal disease is rust disease. Okay. And note that trees that are affected by balsam woolly adelgid are actually more vulnerable to needle cast or root rot. Okay, but there's yet another thing that affects balsam firs. They often die following an unusual winter or spring. And this happens when a very warm, sunny, windy spring is interrupted by a very cold spell. And the warm, sunny, windy days cause water loss from the needles on those hot days, and it's not replaced fast enough by water from the root systems, which are still in the frozen ground. And the stress is too much for some trees, but not for others. So it's not uncommon to see a very healthy tree right next to one that is dead or has rust-colored needles. So here you're seeing several trees that are affected, but then others that are perfectly normal. Okay, this year we had several balsam firs that had rust-colored needles and died, right next to balsam firs that were very healthy. And winter kill happens again when there is a warm, sunny, windy spring interrupted by a very cold spell. And it's because that water loss that occurs on those hot days is not replaced fast enough by water from the root systems, which are still under frozen ground. And we did have episodes of temperatures in the 70s in March and April of this year, followed by freezing temperatures. So we probably lost some of these balsam firs to winter kill. It'll be very interesting. What we're seeing with climate change is that we have lots of fluctuations in our winters and springs. So again, days when it gets very warm, followed by cold, are becoming more common. So I wouldn't be surprised if winter kill becomes more common. Winter kill, by the way, affects not just balsam firs. It can affect other fir trees as well. So that's a little bit about balsam firs. Very interesting, and hopefully you learned a little bit about them.